Put on your leash, take a long sip from the water bowl and cuddle up at the feet of your human, because the smack is back, and this time we are on the trail of In Your House 8, Beware of Dog. I am of course the only good boy of this yard, your host with the most shiny coat, the Maniac Matt tenant. And as long as you rub me on the head, and a few more places too, I'll continue to bring you the very best, and most detailed retro reviews until Travis's return. That's enough of the dog puns, I think, don't you? Now, before we get into this week's review, we have some format notes to go over. Because, as you'll have heard over SummerSlam weekend, NXT UK is coming back at last. You have no idea how much I rejoiced when I heard that news. It is coming back on September the 17th, which means our regular NXT UK reviews will also be returning to the channel. So what I want to try and do, because we need to finish what we started with our journey through In Your House, I don't just want to drop it, is go twice a week if at all possible. So if I can, you'll get the NXT UK review on a Monday, and the In Your House review on a Friday to bookend your week and give you something to look forward to. Now, because I have a life, I know it's hard to believe, isn't it? But because I have a life and I never know where I'm going to be from week to week, not like a homeless person, you understand, just a busy person. I never know whether I'm going to be at home, whether I'm going to be up in Manchester. So, because I never know where I'm going to be from week to week, if it's not possible for me to do the NXT UK, weekly review, then the weeks there isn't one, I'll do an omnibus review the next week that I'm able, if that makes sense. So some weeks you'll get a solo NXT UK review, other weeks you lucky people, you're going to get an omnibus with 2, 3, maybe more than 3 in one sitting. But worry not though, the In Your House reviews will stay weekly because I am on them. I am so on them. But now we've got that out of the way, you can find me, as always, on Twitter at ThePerfectTenant. You can find Travis on Twitter at TheHibikitMD. Go to unionsmack.bigcartel.com where you can pick up all of Travis's merchandise from all of his shows. And, of course, lulu.com where you can purchase my first book, The Undertaker, A Trip Down Death Valley, and my second book, NXT UK Year 1. If it's not out by the time you hear this, then it will be very, very shortly afterwards. But for now, the kennel door is finally open and we can enter In Your House 8, Beware of Dog. Though in truth, this should have been called In Your House the Night the Lights Went Out, because this event is more famous for what happened after the first match than anything that occurred in the ring, in my opinion at least. For anyone who's watched this back on the WWE Network, or on DVD, or on VHS, I haven't had the VHS for years, so I wouldn't be able to tell you, but I do have the DVD. If you didn't get the full story of what happened, or if you don't know, and wondered why the WWF Championship match was the second bout on the card, hideous structuring. Hideous structuring when they put this on the network, seriously. Let me fill you in. This was originally scheduled to take place in Florence, South Carolina. But In Your House 8, Beware of Dog, suffered from being at the epicentre, if you like, of a tropical storm which passed through the area at the time. Now, after the first match, which was Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Mark Mero, all the lights went out in the arena and the broadcast transmission was cut, meaning only those in attendance witnessed the original card, and that took place in the dark. The original broadcast then returned in time for the audience at home to witness the main event. Now, in order to get the rest of this out to those who bought the pay-per-view, WWF reshot the matches that were never seen, and they reshot them 2 days later at a WWF Superstars taping in North Charleston, South Carolina. Some of these are really hard to say without putting your teeth in. There was no In Your House set, as we'll get to later. I've got a thing or two to say about that. But they did at least put the ring skirt on so it didn't look completely like a television taping. It was, oddly, however, when they've put this together on the WWE Network and on DVD, like I said, I can't speak about the VHS because I don't own it anymore, they put it together as it was recorded, which means the main event went on second, and the event ended with the Intercontinental Championship casket match, which on the second night was recorded last. And it makes a very odd watch, but we will get into that shortly. First though, night 1, In Your House 8, Beware of Dog, took place on May the 26th, 1996, from the Florence Civic Centre in Florence, South Carolina. And the dark match on the free-for-all saw the Smoking Guns defeat the Godwins to capture the WWF Tag Team Championships. Now, a lot has happened since we last left In Your House 7, 1 month prior to this. The Godwins had defeated the Body Donners for the Tag Team Championship at a house show on May the 19th in New York City. That was the infamous night when the curtain call took place. And in an attempt to follow the Tag Team Championships wherever they went, Sonny turned on the Body Donners and joined the Godwins after months, absolute months of infatuation from Phineas. However, during this match, Sonny would turn again and kiss Billy Gunn. The kiss distracted Phineas Godwin, and Bart hit him with a German suplex for the victory. I mean, it was a poor ending. It was a really poor ending. I didn't see this match. It might have been included on the DVD, but I watched the network version, like I said. But what a poor ending to a championship match. You know, they wanted us to believe the champions would be beaten by a German suplex. And I know it was Phineas Godwin, and the Godwins didn't really matter, but at the same time, come up with something more original than that. Anyway, this result, it meant that Sonny joined the Smoking Guns, who were experiencing a heel run after their babyface run ran its course. And that was that, new Tag Team Champions. We will see and hear more about that in next week's review, In Your House 9 International Incident. After the free-for-all match, there was an actual dark match, which saw Bob Holly defeat Isaac Yankem DDS. And thank Christ we didn't have to sit through that. Can you imagine Sparky Plug versus Isaac Yankem in 1996? Hard pass. In Your House 8 came fresh off of the curtain call, like I mentioned earlier, which also happened in Madison Square Garden, and as a result, the landscape of WWF was completely changed between In Your House 7 and In Your House 8. Kerry Nash and Scott Hall, they were on their way to WCW. WWF contracts had expired, and following the main event, which saw Shawn Michaels defeat Diesel, the Clique, that being Michaels, Nash, Scott Hall and Helmsley, they all gathered in the ring, hugged and raised each other's arms. Now, the punishment for this, as I'm sure everybody knows the stories, but for newbies to wrestling who don't really know, I like to fill you in a bit, Geely. The punishment for this fell on Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who at the time he was the only expendable member of the group. Vince couldn't punish Shawn, he was the champion. He couldn't punish Nash or Hall, he had no power over them anymore. And so Hunter Hearst Helmsley was the only one low enough on the totem pole to receive the punishment. This meant that his King of the Ring 1996 victory and resultant push was cancelled, and he would basically go on to lose every feud and every major match he fought in for quite some time. But to his credit, he took it on the chin. He didn't bitch, he didn't moan. If he did, he didn't do it in front of the cameras or anyone important. And so he seemed to just get on with it, which held him in good stead later on in his career. In a way, and I thought about this a lot while I was watching In Your House 8, the curtain call, as controversial as it was at the time, and you know, Jim Cornette's had his say about it, how fucking terrible and bad for business it was, etc. And you know, a load of other people have weighed in on it, but it saved WWF from going out of business years later. If you really think about it and cycle it through your mind, because had Hunter not been punished by the company for his part, then he'd have won the 1996 King of the Ring, and there wouldn't have been an Austin 316, and absolutely everything would probably have played out differently. You know, Austin would have got to the main event and been a star, but he might not have, you know, gotten the push when he did, and the character might not have flourished or caught on as huge as it did, and, you know, WWF wouldn't have had the whole Austin McMahon thing in the way it happened. So yes, the curtain call was unprofessional. Yes, it was probably bad for business at the time. But in the long run, it saved the WWF. In Your House 8 began properly with another decent video package for what was meant to be the main event for the WWF Championship between Shawn Michaels and the British Bulldog. The package takes in Diana Hart accusing Shawn of hitting on her. I mean, she's fine, but would you really? No disrespect to the Bulldog or Diana or Georgia Smith or Davey Boy Jr., but Shawn Michaels, really? He'd just broken up with Sunny. I mean, why would you go out for fast food when you've just finished a really, really nice steak? Michaels in the package pleads innocence and says that it isn't him and he would never do that. I found this priceless because this is coming from a man who was attacked by 10 servicemen several months prior to this because he hit on one of their girlfriends and tried to take her back to his hotel room and fuck her. The graphics for this In Your House, they're very good indeed. I like these. The last time around we had a warplane dropping the In Your House logo on a map like a bomb. This time around the logo was in a doghouse with a collar around its neck, acting like a dog, as you would. We come in to Vince McMahon and Jerry Lawler, as usual, and for some reason Vince thanks all those who lost their lives for the sacrifice which has allowed the WWF to stage this event. Now, I might have missed something being British, but I actually wasn't sure what he was talking about here. So if you know of something that happened around this time and lots of, soldiers died, etc., then do drop it in the comments or DM me on Twitter because I'll be very interested to know. The first match, Hunter Hearst Helmsley versus Mark Mero. Now this feud began at WrestleMania 12 when Mark Mero was being interviewed backstage and he and Helmsley had a coming together. It then spread into Mero saving Sable, you try saying that, from Helmsley and Hunter wanting her back because she was the best looking valet he ever had. Of that I can concur. The rivalry then spilled over to In Your House 7, where Helmsley attacked Mero during the free-for-all match with the 1-2-3 Kid and hit him with the pedigree. And that would become a regular sight over the weeks before In Your House 8, because Helmsley then attacked Mero on the Superstars episode prior to In Your House, after Mark had been put in the chicken wing by Bob Backlund. We were shown this video package, by the way, so you knew what had been happening if you hadn't been keeping up with WWF television. Doc Hendricks is backstage. Of course he is. You couldn't get away from him on In Your House events. He was backstage with Mark Mero and Sable, and he asks him, I mean, the line of question here was F for the questions, because he asks Mark Mero what defensive strategies he has to avoid the pedigree. And yes, he used the word defensive strategies. Okay? Ignore all that background noise, that's just me sorting through my notes. In response, Mero avoided the question altogether, actually, didn't bother answering it, and said that it's a new day in his life and he welcomes Hunter to the jungle. It didn't really matter what he said, in all honesty, because everyone was concentrated on Sable, who looked smoking in her tight leather outfit. The match began with Helmsley attacking Mero as he got into the ring, but Mark responded with a lovely slingshot plancher to the outside and a slingshot leg drop as they returned to the ring. Helmsley gains control with a thumb to the eye, and over the next week or two, thumbs to the eye, you'll never want to hear or see another one ever again. They're just so common over these next two In Your House events. Mero uses his left and right jabs as they trade advantage, and then Helmsley gains the upper hand for the rest of the match, and I mean the rest of the match, when he avoids a charge to the corner and Mero's shoulder thunders into the ring post. And that is your story of the bout. Helmsley posts his shoulder again in order to make him fight from behind, and then goes to the injured pin with holds and stomps, which Mero, he sells perfectly, to his credit. He gets a lot of shit, Mark Mero, but during this 96 period, which we'll talk about more next week, he was quite the wrestler. Even when he being Mark Mero, gains moments of momentum, he's unable to execute any moves because of the shoulder. Logical storytelling, and that's what we want from our wrestling. It's a bit of logical storytelling. Now, because he's the jealous, evil bastard, Hunter drags Mero under the bottom rope and wraps his shoulder around the ring post. And this is a simple story. The shoulder work does begin to drag slightly, I'll be honest. And it does seem like it's never going to end. 14 minutes of this 17-minute match has to be all shoulder work. And I very rarely exaggerate for you on this show. 14 minutes has to be just completely working over the shoulder. Mero finally shows signs of a comeback when he reverses a backdrop into a lovely rolling crucifix pinfall for a near fall. But Hunter cuts his momentum short with a clothesline and more work to the shoulder. And now is the time when the bout starts to get repetitive. Mero nails a top rope Hurricane Rana and a tilt-a-whirl head scissors before he catches Hunter with a flying sunset flip, which looks quite good. Unfortunately, he missed the cannonball senton to the outside, and he seemed to hurt his leg. Now, I'm not sure whether that was legit or whether he was just selling, because he did seem to land very awkwardly on the leg as he crashed, and he crashed like a heap of shit to the outside. At this point in the match, you see that he's beginning to fall apart physically. The shoulder, the leg, he looks like he's been masturbating for a month. That seems to become a catchphrase on this podcast. I'll try and find something else to equate it to. But the only man I've known to have more problems with his limbs is Trent Seven. Hunter sets up Mero for the pedigree, but then Sable refuses to look. This causes Helmsley to abandon the move. He goes to the outside and tries to force Sable to watch him, like in a masochistic way, beat up Mark Mero. When he gets back into the ring, Mero catches him with a slingshot and Hunter crashes his head into the ring post, knocks himself out, and Mero pins him for the victory. Now, this was an unusually good match, despite the never-ending repetitive arm work. It just suffered slightly from the very odd ending, which was designed to make Hunter look foolish. And I guess it was all part of the punishment, but how many times have we seen somebody slingshotted into the turnbuckles and whack their heads on the post and still be fine afterwards? But like I said, he was going through a phase of punishment. He took it on the chin. And if you can sit through the arm work and there's not much happening, then you'll be rewarded with a decent little match. We are next taken backstage to where Mr. Perfect is with Camp Cornette, and he reveals that Jim Cornette has a bombshell. Now, the way they build this up is as if Diana Hart is going to announce that she's carrying Shawn's child. They build this so-called bombshell so much to be something really special, and when it's actually revealed, it's not. Jim Cornette says that Shawn Michaels made his bed and tried to get Diana to sleep in it. What a fucking wonderful line that is. And announces that for tonight only, Owen Hart has a special manager's license to accompany the Bulldog to the ring. Now, this would turn out to be an important part of the show, because along with the opening video package, this was the only mention we got of the main event storyline, thanks to said technical problems at the top of the show. And this is when the lights went out. Now, even though the matches occurred in the dark, there were one or two changes to the reshoot 2 days later. For example, Yokozuna defeated Vader on the first night in the match that took place in the dark. That result would change when they reshot the match 2 days later. And also the ending to the casket match was altered. Because they weren't on pay-per-view and no one could really see it, there was no Mankind hiding in the casket during the first night. Because what would have been the point? Like, seriously. Now, I don't want to ruin the end, obviously, of the match if you've not seen it, so we'll skirt over that and get to that at the end of this review. However, one match that did not make the reshoot of Night 2 was Jake the Snake Roberts defeating Justin Hawk Bradshaw in 30 seconds. Because, again, what was the point? I'm not sure, and I can't bring to mind right now whether that happened. Yeah, the reshoot happened on a Superstars and it was shown on the Superstars episode, or whether they just scrapped the idea completely. The power finally comes back on and the broadcast returns. We are taken to Doc Hendricks and Shawn Michaels backstage. Doc asks him if he's focused and concerned about the so-called Jim Cornette bombshell. Shawn says that he is focused and tonight is less beware of Dog and more beware of Click. Little round of applause there for Shawn Michaels' little quip. On his way through the backstage, Michaels literally bumps into Mr. Perfect, which harks back to an old television feud, if you remember. And I can't remember whether it was Raw. I think it might have been Raw, where they fought on the car bonnet and broke the car bonnet, etc. But it showed how far Shawn had come in actual fact. Back then he was a cocksure young man who was looking to conquer the world. Now he was a man, in theory, and body anyway, who had the world on his shoulders. The WWF Championship match. Shawn Michaels defending against the British Bulldog. Unfortunately, knowing this match was the most important of the whole event, and that their pay-per-view audience had missed the entirety of the main show with the exception of the opening match, this including any video packages which may have been designed to hype the main event, they didn't think to show anything in the way of a pre-match video for the feud. Had you tuned in, having not watched the weeks of Raw, the weeks of Superstars, etc., then you wouldn't have really known the ins and outs. Now, I understand that they were pushed for time on their pay-per-view. I understand that they were panicking, that they weren't going to get it back on at all. But at the same time, you can't just make your pay-per-view audience sit there for an hour, 20 minutes in the dark, no feed, and then come back and just throw on what is designed to be your main event without explanation. The opening video package did explain some, but it didn't show absolutely everything. It didn't show Shawn attacking the Bulldog on Superstars after these accusations had been made. It didn't show you where the accusations originally came from, etc. So there was a lot more to this than they were able to show in that opening video package. And like I said, they might have had one or two designed and ready to go, but obviously couldn't show them because they had no audience to show them to. I would have thrown one on just before this and took the 3 minutes off of the actual match itself just in order to build and set the scene. Before the match begins, Clarence Mason says that Shawn Michaels attempted to break up the marriage of the British Bulldog and Diana Hart Smith and is therefore served a summons for attempted alienation of affections. Some words I just cannot say tonight. Just like Jake did with his papers at the last In Your House, Shawn ripped it up because, he's Shawn Michaels. And that was the bombshell, by the way, for anyone waiting for the big reveal. The bombshell was the subpoena for the attempted alienation of affections. Why they bothered, don't ask me. The Bulldog attacks Shawn from behind to start and initiates a really nice beginning, full of reversals and a Shawn dive to the outside. It sets a promising pace, which sadly the pair don't keep up. Shawn controls with a grounded headlock, and then Zaguri, which the Bulldog sells perfectly, and more rest holds, which feel weird. It feels like they're to just pad out the match, because in the early going, they're all applied by the babyface. Now, usually the rest holds go to the heel, so the crowd can get the babyface back into the match and have something to cheer for. But in a way, the Shawn rest holds killed the crowd because they had nothing to do during them. It was very odd. The Bulldog counters an arm vice into an electric chair and then applies more rest holds of his own when the bout needed a healthy sprint of pace and wrestling. However, his shoulder backbreaker, the Bulldog's shoulder backbreaker, I should add, looked really, really good. And it's at this point that the commentary team make their first boo-boo of the evening, Well, first boo-boo of the show, because it's a different commentary team, actually, on night 2. So the commentary team made the first boo-boo of the show when they tried to make us believe that Shawn Michaels has never submitted to anyone. Now, that's wrong. I can't remember all of his submissions. I'm sure there haven't been that many. But he definitely submitted to Bret Hart at the 1992 Survivor Series, without a doubt. So I don't know what they're talking about. Trying to alter history yet again. Shawn appears to trip on the crisscross, and he goes flying from the ring under the bottom rope, and it looks like it throws Davey Boy off slightly. But in actual fact, it serves the match well, because it meant the Bulldog had to go outside, where, it really kicked up a pace. Davey Boy rammed Shawn into the railing. Shawn replied with a slingshot clothesline back into the ring, and then the pair collided in the middle and went down like they'd been tagged by snipers in the crowd. Michaels fought back with a flying double axe handle. The Bulldog ran into the referee, knocked him flying to signal the final sequence of this bout. And oh yes, this is the famous ending between the Bulldog and Shawn Michaels that I'm sure a lot of new wrestling fans won't have ever heard of or seen, or if you have heard of it, it's just been in passing, because I know a lot of brand new wrestling fans don't have the time or the patience for classic shows. So, the Bulldog has bumped the ref. Shawn hits the flying elbow. He lines up for the Sweet Chin Music, and then Owen is in, and Owen eats Sweet Chin Music instead. Shawn Michaels then counters a running power slam as a second referee enters. That's going to be important. He catches the Bulldog in a German suplex, and the referee counts to 3. But after he's counted to 3, he awards the bout to the British Bulldog as the crowd look genuinely shocked. Like they never saw this coming whatsoever. But sadly, and I do say sadly because this was quite a good match, this is where a series of illogical events kick in. Firstly, Earl Hebner, original ref that got bumped by the Bulldog, is back in, and for some reason just awards the bout to Shawn Michaels. There's no mention of a disqualification. He didn't see the original pinfall, so he can't say for sure whose shoulders were actually touching the mat. It's almost like Earl just decided that he wanted Shawn to win to be popular. Then, Diana steals the belt. Gorilla Monsoon marches out, takes the belt from Diana, and after he consults with the referees, he declares this bout a draw, pending a rematch. As a result, of course, Shawn Michaels retains the WWF Championship because, he's Shawn Michaels. The replay then shows that actually Michaels' shoulders were down, and milliseconds before the referee counted to 3, the British Bulldog lifted his left shoulder, might have been his right shoulder, maybe an inch off the mat. So Bulldog should have won. The British Bulldog should have been WWF champion. How about that for a screw job? But this is where the illogicality comes in, if you like, and try to stay with me. I know I ramble a lot, but there is a point to my rambling, so stick with me. Almost upon the referee's count of 3, okay, the Bulldog's music began to play. It was almost like, and I think the second referee was Mike Chioda. So Mike Chioda's hand comes down, and as soon as it touches the mat, the Bulldog's theme just starts to play. Before it was even clear who the ref would award the match to. And this was baffling even more, because Mike Chioda was level with Shawn Michaels' waist, which means he couldn't see clearly by the replay. Mike Chioda couldn't see the Bulldog's shoulders to award him the match. So how did he know the Bulldog won and it wasn't a draw? Illogical. And looking back all these years, it was a baffling ending which made no sense whatsoever. As a kid, this was exciting. This was some controversy which got you talking in the playground. But looking back now, it's like, what the fuck are you doing? It would have made so much more sense, okay, for Earl Hebner to get back in and count the Bulldog's shoulders down at the exact same time as Kyoto counted Shawn Michaels' shoulders down. At least then both men would have been, covered, and there would have been no room for dispute. This was an end for the sake of booking match 2, and even though it was contentious at the time, it was just an end for an end's sake. There were better ways, most probably, to go about getting match 2 in. You could have used my double ref count, as I have just opined. I have swallowed a thesaurus this week. Nevertheless, this was a fine match. It suffered from the wealth of rest holds, and I don't think it was as good as the rest of Shawn's title matches in '96, because he was having some stunners. But it's still a decent entry into his reign as champion, and they'd have a chance to rectify what they did wrong at King of the Ring the month after, which they did. That match, Shawn Michaels versus the British Bulldog from the 1996 King of the Ring, was an absolute cracker. That is where night 1 ended, or so everyone thought. There were 2 dark matches after the event went off air for the last time. Ahmed Johnson defeated Jerry Lawler, and the Ultimate Warrior defeated Owen Hart. From here, the broadcast version cuts to the re-recorded version 2 days later, and this time the commentary team are much better because it's Jim Ross and it's Mr. Perfect. And Ross takes the time to explain what's happening. And like I said when we began this review, it's a very odd feeling because, as stated, there was no In Your House set, just the metal superstar scaffold, and it didn't really feel like an In Your House. However, the odd setting probably made the second part more enjoyable than the first part, I'm going to go out on a limb and say. We kick straight in with a video package of the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, from the previous night on Raw. And at least they bothered to further the rivalries on Raw and didn't just pretend they never happened. DiBiase says that if Stone Cold Steve Austin loses to Savio Vega, then he will leave the WWF. However, if Savio Vega loses, then he will become Ted DiBiase's chauffeur. Caribbean strap match, Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Savio Vega. And this feud, it really began all the way back at In Your House 5, when DiBiase recruited Santa Claus to attack Savio as they were handing out presents. And then from there, the rivalry passed on to Steve Austin on the March the 11th Raw, when Savio Vega fought him for the first time, and their match ended in a double countout. They would, of course, collide again at WrestleMania 12, which Austin won, and then after the whole fiasco with the Intercontinental Championship, see our In Your House 7 review for that. I think it was 7. I'm getting very, very lost now on where we are and what's gone before. Savio Vega donned the mask of the Caribbean Kid on the April the 13th, 1996 Raw, where he defeated Steve Austin. Now, to continue this rivalry, both men fought in the dark match of In Your House 7, which Austin won, bringing us to a Caribbean strap match, the final match in their feud, I believe it was. And the rules to this are simple. Simple pimple. The first man to touch all 4 corners of the ring wins the match, and of course they are tethered to each other via the strap by the wrist. Savio Vega dominates the early going by throwing Austin around, whipping him with the strap as Austin tries to get away, but forgets that he's tethered to Vega. The tide turns for a while on a turnbuckle attempt when Vega gets the strap caught between his legs. That's interesting. Austin pulls it violently up, and it must have crushed a twin or two down there, because Vega flips in a really nice spot, and I don't think I've ever seen him rotate like that. The match spills to the outside. Austin drops Vega over the guardrail, chokes him with the strap from over the top rope, and it almost looks like he's hanging him via a noose in a very good sequence. And you could see the Stone Cold character really, really developing here. With Savio down and reeling, Austin attempts to touch the buckles, but he's cut short, and he then backdrops Savio over the top rope, but as they're attached, he pulls Austin over with him and suplexes him on the outside. Again, a very good series of series, sequence, whatever you prefer to call it, of moves here. More corner attempts follow, which are thwarted by both, and then they go up to the top rope, and the battle ends in Savio Vega suplexing Austin from the top, which was brave, because one slip of that strap around someone's ankle or neck or arm could have been disastrous. There's a lovely dramatic moment here. Vega touches 3 turnbuckles. He runs for the 4th. Austin catches him just in the nick of time and nails him with a carrying spinebuster. The timing on that was absolutely fan-dabby-dozy. After they trade tombstone attempts, Austin hangs Vega from the top rope again, puts him on the outside, and then for some strange reason goes up to the top rope. But Savio Vega is quicker. He pulls Austin from the top rope via the strap, and Austin just bundles into the guardrail in another really, really good little moment. Austin then applies the $1 Million Dream, which Vega sells really well, but he breaks by pushing back on the turnbuckle. And then Austin wraps the strap around Savio's neck and drags him to the corner like a real cold-hearted bastard. So I don't care if I choke you to death. I don't care if I break your neck. I'm going to win this match. However, in a very clever and innovative ending, Vega touches the buckles behind Austin's back, which Steve doesn't see. $1 Million Man does. And as they get to the 4th buckle, Vega yanks Austin back and they engage in a tug of war. Now, Austin falls backwards. Savio Vega goes flying over his head into the 4th turnbuckle and wins the match. Steve Austin then walks away from Ted DiBiase as he yells in the middle of the ring, and Savio Vega calls for the music to stop and the crowd to sing the goodbye song to Ted DiBiase, as Jim Ross and Mr. Perfect tell us that is Ted DiBiase's career in the WWF over. And what a career it was. Honestly, wrestler and manager, what a career. And if one person doesn't get the credit he deserves for such a wonderful wrestling career, then it's Ted DiBiase. He couldn't do any more it was the right result, couldn't do no more in the WWF. But it was still sad, to see him take that final walk. And of course he'd follow Nash and Hall to WCW, but it was really WWF after Mid-South where he made his name, where he became famous as the $1 Million Man. And what a career. What a career. For a strap match, this was very good. And I'm going to go as far as saying it's probably a forgotten classic, actually. Both men really put their all into it, and it was by far the best thing on the card. And I wouldn't have thought a Savio Vega match could top a Shawn Michaels British Bulldog match. But for me, and you might disagree, that's fine. For me, absolutely did. Both men deserve a round of applause. You must see this match if you haven't already. Or if you haven't seen it in years, you owe it to yourself to go back and watch it. Shawn Michaels is shown backstage chatting on America Online, and this is where that famous video/GIF comes from, of him just jabbing at the keys on this old laptop like he doesn't know how to use it. And when I say old, you could smash somebody's head in with this laptop. It's that big and that heavy. The next cab off the rank is Vader versus Yokozuna. Now, this stemmed from the Superstars episode. 7 weeks prior, when Vader broke Yokozuna's leg with repeated Vader bombs. We did see this video package at the beginning of Vader's match with Razor Ramon in Your House 7. And of course, Vader didn't really break his leg. Yokozuna was just given time off in order to lose weight. And we all know how that turned out. The match gets straight into it. Heavy punches, which Vader breaks by backing into the corner and stepping through the ropes. And what follows is basically a series of short exchanges, then followed by long breaks to pad this out. They tease a few false restarts. Yokozuna hits Vader with a running splash, sends him flying over the top rope with a lovely clothesline, but then Vader is back in with some wicked shots to the head. Now, we've said it over the last few reviews, But this is really where you see how far Yokozuna had fallen since 1994. Not only is he so large that he can barely move, but the man once lauded as being one of the best big men in the history of the industry, he just looked completely outclassed by Vader. Had this match taken place 2 years earlier, it would have been a contender for Match of the Year, without a doubt. But as it is, this is just two big men trying to get through, I think it was 8.5 minutes. Way too long. Yokozuna goes to Vader's leg to pay off the storyline somewhat, but it doesn't last, and the pair can't do much because of their size. But what they do accomplish, it is entertaining enough to keep this watchable. Jim Ross then, out of nowhere, and for some reason, I expected better of Jim Ross, says that Ahmed Johnson is the only man in history to have slammed Yokozuna, which is doing Lex Luger dirty, really, after he jumped back to WCW the year before. Who says Vince holds a grudge, eh? Yokozuna goes for the Banzai drop, but Jim Cornette stops him and is pulled into the ring. And Cornette's just wonderful in his cowardly heel role. Yokozuna goes for the Banzai drop on Jim, but Vader pulls Cornette away and Yokozuna crashes into the mat. Vader splashes the leg that he broke and then hits the Vader bomb for the victory. This was a fine big man match, even though it featured all the stalling. And it would really be the end of Yokozuna in WWF. Even though he'd stick around until November, he was a mere background player in the company from this moment onwards. He'd be eliminated by Owen Hart in the first round of the King of the Ring, relegated to the free-for-all at SummerSlam, where he lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin in less than 2 minutes, and then just a mainstay on house shows, really, until his final appearance at that year's Survivor Series. And it was, and I know he was over £600, but this really was an unfitting ending for a man who had been as prominent as Yokozuna was in the early 90s. Did he deserve better? Yes, he did. Sadly, he didn't get it. We get an advert for King of the Ring the following month with all different kings, both historical and real, beating up Jerry Lawler. And I always loved this advert as a kid. It's probably the one I remember most from my childhood. For a pay-per-view anyway. Obviously the defining your childhood advert memory, if there is such a thing, is Bret Hart walking up the hallway and that annoying little kid shouting Bret after him. And then Bret coming back and putting his glasses on the kid. Jim Ross tells us that at the King of the Ring we will see Shawn Michaels versus the British Bulldog for the WWF Championship in the promised rematch. The Smoking Guns versus the Godwins for the WWF Tag Team Championships. And Jerry the King Lawler versus the Ultimate Warrior. We then see the King of the Ring brackets. And it doesn't matter how old you are. You could be 99 years old. In the future, obviously. But seeing the retro King of the Ring brackets, it'll always take you right back to being a child again. I absolutely love them. The final match and the unintended main event of In Your House 8, Beware of Dog, was WWF Intercontinental Championship casket match. Goldust defending against The Undertaker. It's really odd to think, and I got the same feeling when I wrote my Undertaker book, which, cheap plug, is available now from lulu.com, that throughout his time in the WWF, The Undertaker never held the Intercontinental Championship. Not ever. He had matches for it, but he never held the Intercontinental Championship. It's a weird feeling, right? Anyway, the commentary team strike again. Third strike and you're out, but luckily this is the end of the pay-per-view anyway. And Mr. Perfect wrongly tells us that Goldust will be the first person to defeat The Undertaker in a casket match if he can get the job done. Now, that, to my memory, would have been Yokozuna, at least on pay-per-view. So, for all of you listening now, here's a little quiz. And there's a prize for this little quiz. I want you to use your wrestling history or the internet or whatever you prefer, it doesn't matter. I want you to tell me how many casket matches The Undertaker and Yokozuna had between 1993 and 1994, up until the very end of 1994. These include casket matches on pay-per-view, on house shows, dark matches even. I want the total number of casket matches they had together up to the end of 1994. And here's a little clue. It's many, many more than you would ever think. The winner will receive a free copy of my book, NXT UK Year 1. And you can get hold of me on Twitter. My DMs are open on Twitter. So you can DM me the answer on Twitter, or you can tweet me the answer, and I'll jot your name and your Twitter handle down, etc. And I will contact the winner. Let's say this is open until the end of October. So you've got until the end of October to enter. Entries will close on October the 31st, and the winner will be announced shortly after on this podcast and contacted via Twitter. So if this goes well, we might do a few more giveaways. Let's see how it goes. But remember, you've got to October the 31st, total number of casket matches between The Undertaker and Yokozuna between 93 and 94. And DM me your answer on Twitter. My DMs are open, just don't take the piss. Or tweet me the answer, and I will enter you into the competition. If no one gets it spot on, then the closest will be declared the winner. I cannot say fairer than that. We are taken to a video package of Raw the previous night, where we see the rivalry between Ahmed Johnson and Goldust escalate. First was shown Johnson taking Goldust back to the ring as he tried to bail, and then Goldust kissing Ahmed Johnson full on the lips and passing it off as mouth to mouth after Johnson was knocked unconscious by Owen Hart. The package then ends with a great shot of Ahmed barging. He just barges this security guard through the locker room door. This would, of course, lead to their Intercontinental Championship match at King of the Ring, but more on that in next week's In Your House at 9 review. As the match begins, The Undertaker is stood behind Goldust as the lights come back on, and Goldust pulls his best Kamala, rest in peace, impressions, and freaks out every time he has to go near the casket. The match spills to the arena floor, where The Undertaker rams Goldust into the casket and the steel steps, and when it returns to the ring, he hits him with a crisp old school and a standing leg drop. Goldust botches the drop down uppercut, which he looks really bad this. Like really, he misses him by about 2 foot. How you can miss a man bent over you, in the face / throat, is beyond me. But he manages to hit a sloppy tombstone, which I thought almost broke Mark Calloway's neck. He had him that low. And then Goldust rolls The Undertaker into the casket, but Undertaker fights out. Goldust is now in control. He backdrops The Undertaker over the top rope, and the match goes back outside, where he uses the steps to his advantage and chokes The Undertaker with a cable. Unfortunately, when they do return to the ring, Goldust, he locks in a long sleeper hold, which was just a staple of casket matches in the 90s. Goldust tries to coffin again, but The Undertaker's arm shoots out, and this is where a little great moment happens. Goldust panics. He lays on top of the casket to try and force The Undertaker back in, but Mark Calloway powers out, and in doing so, he breaks the lid of the coffin, and it flies clean off, and the referees have to do their best to hold it down on any casket attempt that follows. What a botch. The end came when The Undertaker pulled Goldust off of the top rope, giggly, nailed a tombstone, but when he opened up the casket, Mankind was waiting inside. He then applied the mandible claw and pulled The Undertaker into the casket, which he then locked, even though the lid clearly wasn't staying on, and Goldust retains the Intercontinental Championship. After the match, the casket began to smoke, and when they finally got the lid off, not that it was that hard, The Undertaker disappeared to parts unknown, or just under the ring, for those interested. This was the beginning of the Mankind and Goldust partnership, that little bizarre bizarre partnership they had, which didn't last very long. And probably the best casket match the Undertaker had up to that point. It wasn't great, but it was by far the best casket match we'd seen up to that point. In Your House 8, Beware of Dog, it was a really good all-round event. None of the matches really stunk. The only thing that throws you slightly is the event being in 2 parts and noticeably feeling different. But if you can get over that, then this is a strong contender for the best In Your House we've reviewed yet. The WWF Championship match is strong. The strap match is the best match Savio Vega had in WWF, singles-wise at least in my opinion. Hunter Hearst Helmsley, again arguably the best pay-per-view match he had up to this point. Goldust shone like he hadn't before, and Vader was primed for his main event run with Shawn Michaels in the summer. You can't really go wrong with this. And for that reason, I'm giving this In Your House a strong B+. I recommend you watch it. It is it's bitty in the way it's put together, and it's odd in the way it's put together, but match quality wise, decent enough for a B+. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining me this week. Do not forget to enter our little competition, our little giveaway. If it goes well, we may have more stuff to give away in the future. You can catch me, as always, on Twitter at ThePerfectTenant. Catch Travis on Twitter at TheHabickyTMD. Go to unionsmack.bigcartel.com for all your merchandise needs, and lulu.com where you can purchase a copy of my book, The Undertaker, A Trip Down Death Valley, and my new book, NXT UK Year 1, which, if it's not available by the time you listen to this, will be very, very shortly afterwards. So keep your eye on Twitter, keep your eye on the website, and we will notify you when it is available. I can't thank you enough for sticking with me again for another week. It means a lot while Travis is away. I know you're probably bored of my voice by now, but we get some history done. We get some good times rolling, if you like. And I will see you again next week with In Your House 9 International Incident. But until then, my friends, wear a mask, take care of yourselves. Cheerio, mates.